Welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, Kweisi Mfume wants to replace Paul Sarbanes as a U.S. Senator from Maryland. We speak with the former congressman and NAACP chief about his policy goals and his prospects for being elected. Just what is the massive NSA snooping all about? We hear from author, investigator, and national security specialist Scott Armstrong. Also, it's called the Capitol Fringe Festival. It's not about embroidery, says guest Damian Sinclair. It's about taking the arts to the community. And it's coming to D.C. real soon. We've got music by singer-songwriter Zoe Mulford. And poet Sunil Freeman shares his dream about Miles Davis. And Naomi Ayala is saved.
When Papo looks on her 45-degree angle eyes, the silent moon rises from her mouth, and to the velvet evening that engulfs him, makes him want to speak, makes him want to stand up.
Welcome to the Forum at the Coffee House. Coming up on September 12th, Maryland Democrats choose who will represent their party in the November general elections. Statewide, there are competitive primary races for controller, attorney general, governor, and U.S. senator, not to mention numerous state, county, and municipal races. Adding juice to the primaries, Paul Sarbanes, the longest-serving senator in Maryland history, is retiring. His is one of the few Senate seats nationwide the Republicans have any hope to pick up. Earlier this year, we invited the dark horse candidates for the Senate to join us, and we chatted with university professor Alan Lichtman. Currently leading the Democratic polls for U.S. Senate is Baltimore area Congressman Ben Cardin. In striking distance is former Congressman and NAACP leader Kweisi Mfume, also from the Baltimore area. Representative Cardin failed to respond to our invitation to appear, so Congressman Mfume gets the floor to himself. Welcome back to the Coffee House.
Thank you very much. I went by default. I knew it.
Congratulations.
How are you?
I'm fine.
I was looking at the early clips. I can't believe it's been a whole year. I mean, if I didn't know any better, I think it was the same person, yet I know it's been a whole year. I feel it.
You feel it.
Yeah.
Let's go back even earlier than a year. Let's go back to your childhood, which many people know about the story of your upbringing and the gangbanging and crime and parenting out of wedlock, and then turning it all around. And tell us a little bit about that and how you did turn it around.
Well, I think I had pretty much a normal childhood, except that we were living in poverty. But as a child, you really don't know that. You're happy to get up. You're happy if your parents love you. You're happy if you're able to go join the baseball team or go fishing or something like that. So it was a good childhood. I got basic values from my family. We were taught to work hard, play by the rules, love our country, cherish our faith. It was a household where you were taught respect and you were taught responsibility. And things got tough for us as my mother continued to get ill after my stepfather had left home and at some point in time developed a terminal illness. Would talk to me every night before putting me to bed about life and responsibility and taking care of my younger sisters and all that. But the poverty was sitting in even harder, and her pain began to be excruciating. And one night in the middle of those conversations, my mother looked at me and made a sound that I had never heard before, never heard since, and she fell off into my arms and died. Well, for me, everything changed in the twinkling of an eye. 2 weeks later, I had dropped out of school after the funeral to be able to take care of my younger sisters. There was nobody else left. We were split up for a while and sort of homeless, living from house to house. People who felt sorry would bring us in for a week or two. And finally, we all ended up split up pretty much. And so I worked, carried groceries, shined shoes, did whatever I could for a couple of years, and then just got angry, like a lot of young people in this society. You know, your reality was one thing, and you look at TV and there was something else totally different. I mean, for me, it was, to look and see Izzy and Harriet in a nice home and Ward Cleaver and the kids in a two-car garage, And I would turn that off, and my reality was a 6x9 room where I lived for 3 years in the household of family members. So I got angry. I dropped further out of society. I started running with gangs. I became a teenage parent. I had no skills. I had no education, no hope for the future. I was expecting to be drafted every day because the war was going on, and you know, you had to sign up for the draft then, as I did. And I was just angry with society. I remember going back to the steps of the Catholic Church that I was raised in and spitting on the steps and cursing God and saying, how could you do this to a woman in her mid-30s with 4 kids who didn't do anything but love you, God? I mean, what is this about, and what kind of justice is that? Fortunately for me, I didn't get killed in the process and didn't get sentenced to some long jail term or anything. And at the age of 22, Mark, in the middle of the summer, in the middle of July, in the middle of the night, and in the middle of a crap game, it all started clicking for me. I was 22 years of age, and I underwent an epiphany that I write about in my book that's so hard to really explain, but that's when the lights came on. I was 22 years of age, and I knew if I could just start turning my life around and get away from the gangs and find a way to put it back together and get an education.
Did you have to leave the community you were in order to do that?
Well, that's an interesting question. You know, you really can't turn in a letter of resignation to a gang. We were in for life. I mean, I remember we cut our wrists and blood flowed from one to another. This was long before there were a whole lot of concerns about blood and disease. But that was the binding of it. And it said that you were in for life, and if you ever got out, then anybody in the gang could kill you. And that was like an honor. And then they would move up a notch. And so there were many attempts on my life after I said I was quitting. And I've got scars all over my body, and my head had been split open a couple of times. And I just kept getting stitched up, and fortunately somebody would scream or holler. They saw that taking place, and the police would eventually come, and I'd wake up in the hospital room. And then they just left me alone after about 6 months. I don't know if they thought that I was crazy or that I really meant that I was going to do something else, but they left me alone. So I was able to stay in that neighborhood because I had nowhere to go. I mean, I didn't have any mobility. I didn't have a car and job.
Do you know any of those folks today?
Yeah, I know a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. And have they left that world for the most part?
Well, 2 are very, very, very ill. They're my age. They look much older. They're very ill with terminal diseases. 2 others are in jail who I've not seen since we were in our early 20s, and they've been there for a long time. And the other 6, 7, or 8 are all dead. Yeah.
But you did turn it around.
Believe me, I really do believe in miracles, and I believe in this whole thing about only in America, because for me it was not just an old slogan. It was something I realized it couldn't happen in a lot of places the way it happened here. And I was really blessed. I mean, I had left the church, but I recognized a real blessing in the ability just to be able to find myself again and to start worshiping again and start putting together my life. So I had to go. You know, I would work all day long, and then I'd catch the Greyhound bus, go downtown over top of the bus station and take GED classes. And in those days, in the late 1960s, you actually had to pay for your GED. So I would do that, and I'd go home, and I'd catch the bus and go to work the next morning, catch another bus and go down there. And that went on for about a year, but I got my GED certificate. I ended up going to a community college because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I'd done well in school as a child and didn't know if I could really compete again. But the community college experience was good for me. I quickly knew I needed more. I enrolled in a 4-year institution at Morgan State University and ultimately graduated at the top of my class. And a couple of years went by. I worked and I was taking care of my kids. And then I got into Johns Hopkins and worked on and earned my master's degree. In the middle of all that, I was doing radio and doing a little bit of filling in on TV, but I got elected to the city council in that process by 3 votes in Baltimore. 3 votes is still the closest election in the city, in the state, and anywhere. I don't advise anybody to get elected that way because you kind of age in the process of recounts, but that was the beginning for me. And I spent 7 years in the city council kind of learning the tools of the legislative process, and that's why I've always only wanted to be a legislator. I never wanted to be mayor or governor or anything like that. like the ability of being able to work in a network of people, all of whom are different. Few agree on anything, and at the end of the day, strike a consensus, be able to move legislation through and to actually get something done.
After you served in Congress, you served for a period of time as the head of the NAACP, leading civil rights organization. Today, probably the leading civil rights issue is that of immigrants and immigrant rights. And you have a whole spectrum of opinion about what we should be doing about that, from basically criminalizing the 11 to 12 million immigrants to creating a guest worker program with no citizenship, to creating a process where those who are undocumented can get their citizenship by playing by the rules, working hard, whatever. What's your perspective on that?
Well, that's a good question, because it really requires, if we're to really answer it, for us to think about what we're dealing with. We start off with the reality that this is a nation of immigrants. I mean, we all came here. Some came for a thrill, and some of us came against our will, but we all got here. And we were all immigrants. This was the land of many Indian tribes prior to that. And so if you start with that premise, it says, okay, immigration can't be a bad thing, but how do we reform it and how do we control it to make sure that it is still a good thing? And how do we find a way to make sure that it's just and fair? And if we ask those questions up front, what we do after that, I think, becomes not easy, but it becomes balanced. And I don't know if those questions were necessarily answered up front. I believe we need real reform in our immigration laws, and I believe we've got to find a way to get groups to participate. I don't believe that we should take the approach of Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, who, by the way, I served with for 10 years. Nice guy, just a wrong approach that says we're going to build a wall for 700 miles around our southern border, and that's going to keep people out. The last time I looked at a 700-foot wall, I remember trying to figure out how I'm going to jump over it, and there will be people taking advantage of that if they just want to get in. Or you go to the end of the wall. It just doesn't make sense. And then the part of the bill that says if you're a priest or a healthcare worker or a teacher or just a citizen and you see someone who, let's say, is injured in an accident and they happen to be an undocumented worker, if you go to help them, you've created a felony and then you are a felon. And then the third part of the bill says something about undocumented presence, which I don't understand, but I think that means Dick Cheney on a firing range without proper papers, so maybe that's undocumented presence. I'm not making light of this. I just think that there's a better approach to that. There's got to be a better approach to that.
And should that include a path to citizenship?
Absolutely. We have to create pathways to citizenship, and we have to really hope that people want to be citizens. I think that if there's an undocumented worker that doesn't want to be a citizen, that person goes over here until I can deal with he or she and deal with the ones who really want to become citizens and create pathways for that to happen. So the question becomes, what are the pathways? Is it amnesty? Is it a guest worker program? Is it something else? The one thing it has to be is fair. You can't take people who've been in line waiting to become citizens using their own pathway and sort of ignore them and put everybody else in front. So this is a tough issue. I mean, it's really tough. We ought not be doing it just as the Senate or just as the House. We ought to be doing it with representatives of the groups that are affected. We ought to be having the business community at the table, because they're a large player in all of this, and we've not really kind of forced them to take some responsibility. And we've got to keep asking ourselves, is it fair and is it just?
If you are the Democratic nominee for Senate, likely you'll be facing Michael Steele, the current lieutenant governor, who is Catholic, like yourself, and has a position against abortion, against the death penalty, also against gay marriage. Where do you stand on those issues?
Well, what was the first one here?
Abortion.
I believe,
death penalty, gay marriage.
Yeah. Two things about abortion. First of all, I've never seen anybody running around wanting to have an abortion, period. And I've never seen people running around advocating for abortion, period. I believe that a woman has the right and the responsibility unto herself, in conjunction with her God or her mate, to make that decision. And the funniest thing I've always seen are male legislators trying to tell women what to do with their bodies and their reproductive rights, and I just think that's wrong. The second issue,
death penalty.
Death penalty. I've been opposed to the death penalty all along, simply because it's irreversible. And it was almost earlier in my life, a kind of automatic response. And then I got older, and they did something that they were able to clone the human genome, and there's DNA, and now we know that we've executed a lot of people that we shouldn't have, and that we've got a lot of people that we're finding out every day that shouldn't be on death row. I just don't think it works. It's clearly not a deterrent. If it makes us feel macho sometimes, and we're angry as we are sometimes because there are hideous crimes that are created out here, and we all just say, let's get even, let's get even. But, you know, we've got to put the skids on, too, because we're not really getting even. We're creating a situation and an atmosphere where we could, in other places, be executing innocent people. I believe in life with absolutely no parole. The third issue?
The gay marriage issue.
Gay marriage. I believe that between two consenting adults, if they in fact are forced, and they are in this society, because the society says you can't go into a medical emergency room unless you are married, a married family member. You certainly can't make decisions about a person's life and death when they're in a terminal situation unless you're married. In many financial dealings and real estate and estate dealings, you've got to be married. So it's married. The society says you've got to be married to do this, and then the society says, well, but you can't be married if you happen to be two grown consenting adults of the same sex. And I just believe that's wrong. I don't think that the state should be doing that. And let me tell you why. And it goes back to something you said. All my life, I have fought for this whole issue of civil rights. I believe that racism, sexism, anti-Semitism are wrong, that black bigotry is just as cruel and evil as white bigotry or any other kind, that gay bashing, immigrant bashing, union bashing are wrong. I think that all forms of discrimination are wrong. So if, for me at least, I would be kind of hypocritical to say, okay, today I'm picking this discrimination and I'm saying that's wrong, but I'm going to turn my eye to that. And I can't do that. I'm against all discrimination. I think we have discriminatory laws with respect to same-sex couples, and that's my position, which separates me from Mr. Steele.
Last year when you were on the show, I asked you to prioritize certain issues, not so much whether you supported or opposed them, but how important they were to you. And I listed a series of them, and we began with the question of the minimum wage. Let's take a look at that.
Okay. Families and workers in this society need a livable wage where they are not making just a scant income and barely existing, but where they can in fact do the things that you expect to do by working a job and giving the best that you have.
Addressing the spread of HIV.
Oh, it's very significant. And not just in terms of minority communities or gay communities. It ought to be significant within the nation. It's at it's proportions that we've never seen before. We talk about the end result, which is full-blown AIDS, but we ought to talk more and research more and I think work more to deal with this early stages of HIV. And I just, you know, I was disheartened when I heard President Cheney make this fleeting reference to, oh, what is that? Or we're doing something with it, as if he didn't know. It affects all of us in this society. We have to have ownership of it, and it's extremely important to me.
Fighting global warming.
Global warming? It's important, but maybe a step down on the pole of things that are important. You know, Vice President Gore and all that he tried to lead in terms of getting people to think about that is significant. It's, I don't want to say long-term in the sense that it's far off, but because it's occurring today, what we do in terms of what we put into the atmosphere and how that causes a breakdown and the shifting of things as we know it. But I would not put it at the same level as the other two issues that we just talked about. Correction.
Well, since that time, we've had Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
And I think it's opened up a lot of people's eyes about the dangers that global warming
and they're very, very, very serious dangers. Not just dangers to the ozone, but what happens as a result of the thinning of that and how Earth and patterns, weather patterns, as we know, continue to shift and shift. And we're laughing. Those of you who are watching, we're laughing because last year, Mark, to his credit, said, you know, maybe you'd want to look at some other things related to that. And I did, and you were right. And I wouldn't say that it is way down on a list. I think it's much higher up on a list of priorities. This whole issue of hurricanes and typhoons in and of itself, and to some extent, who knows, maybe even the tsunami, could all be interacting and related to what's happening as a result of this continuing kind of greenhouse effect where the globe itself and the temperature, the average temperature on the globe, continues to increase.
What should we do about our dependence on foreign oil, and about how do we get off of the fossil fuel habit?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, we've got to admit there's a problem in this society, that there is not an infinite amount of oil. It's a finite amount. It's going to run out someday, and until it runs out, as the supply goes down, the price is going to go up. It's just basic supply and demand, and so it's going to keep going up. If we accept that at the premise that we've got to do something, we have a problem, I think there are a couple of short-term things and some long-term things. Long-term, we ought to make sure that automakers in this country who receive huge tax credits from the government and certain privileges based on the fact that they employ so many people, we've got to change our CAFE standards. CAFE are corporate average fuel economy standards. Right now it's at 27 miles per gallon. In 1992 it was at 27 miles per gallon, and yet we know in terms of engineering we can create cars, Detroit that can run at 43, 45 miles per gallon. But nobody wants to go back in and revisit CAFE standards and sort of put a mandate on the industry because, you know, the industry's doling a lot of special interest money out to lobbyists and to elected officials, which is another conversation. And so there's a reluctance to do that. We know we have to come up and develop alternative fuels that are renewable in many instances, and yet we've been slow to do that as a government. But I think if we put in incentives and make sure that we use some of our research dollars that we're sending out to colleges and universities, we could find a way to start doing that at an accelerated pace so that it is not 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I think we do have to talk about consumption and the way we find ways at least to get people to consume less than they're consuming now. And that gives some control back to consumers to be able to have an effect on prices, which are having an effect on them. I think we've got to really go back and look at short-term things that we might be able to do now. And somebody said to me, you know, you really shouldn't talk about short-term solutions. Well, I have to think about them as I think about long-term solutions, because there are a lot of people right now in these summer months who are hit extremely hard as a result of these prices. And so I've been advocating that we lift the federal tax and the state tax on fuel, which would in tandem reduce fuel per gallon by 41 cents, which helps people in these months where they've got to travel. And that's only for a 90-day period, and it's short term, but it's some instant relief. Long term is where we have to go. We've got to just develop alternative fuels that are renewable. We've got to find a way to use our ability technologically to make better vehicles, to keep emission down and increase the capacity on a gallon of gas. And we've got to, I believe, have a national mandate. I mean, it would be refreshing if the president, instead of saying in his State of the Union, we've got to stop being oil addicts, would be to put out a vision about here's how we're going to do this. The same way we said here's how we're going to go to the moon. We need that as a nation, and everybody needs to be prepared to kind of get behind that, or we're going to be stuck in this position for a long time.
The president's poll numbers are way down. Republicans in Congress are fighting off scandals. It's probably the best environment for the Democrats to be running in years. Yet there are areas where the Republicans seem to possibly be making some headway. In particular, in Pennsylvania, Lynn Swan's running for governor. In Ohio, Kenneth Blackwell's running for governor. And in Maryland, Michael Steele's going to run for Senate, and possibly you're going to run for Senate. But it seems like the Republicans have found a way to put forward prominent African American candidates, and are the Democrats missing the boat here?
Well, I think the Democrats are giving up the high ground on diversity, a high ground that Democrats worked and toiled at for many, many years when it wasn't popular, going back to the days of the Johnson administration and forward, and are giving that up as if, you know, it doesn't matter anymore. And the Republicans, to their credit, are saying, we recognize in order to stay in power in the future, we've got to cultivate different voting blocks. We just can't all expect that these conservative white men or Joe Sixpack's going to vote for us. The nation's changing, the demographics changing, and so how do we change? I think what you see from the Republican Party is actually a smart approach. I mean, they're trying to find a way through immigration, by mollifying what's happening with the impact of immigration reform, through this whole issue of diversity, by encouraging African American candidates to take on statewide races, and then to have their chairman go out and talk about these are the things we've believed in all along. Well, that's debatable. I mean, it's the party of Lincoln, but the party didn't do all that it could have done through a very important era called the Civil Rights era in our country. And yet they are taking the high ground from Democrats who seem to be sluggish and slow on this. And I don't understand it. I just don't understand that, because, you know, it's in the Democratic Party where over the last 40 years you've had this whole cadre of candidates being groomed and honed, and, you know, we all got in the pecking order and did what we were supposed to do. So people expect that you'd get a shot, and it's been slow to happen. And I think, to the credit of the Republican Party, aside from the fact, in my opinion at least, that it's more style than substance, it doesn't matter to people who've been waiting to have an opportunity to believe that this process would in fact open up to all people.
At this point in the campaign, well, let's say a year ago, when we looked at the poll numbers, which you said were poppycock, don't pay attention, but you were looking at them, and you're looking at them again. At that time, you, in a three-way race in the primary, you led the field. But in a two-way race against Michael Steele, Ben Cardin ran more strongly than you, but both of you beat him. That's still the case today. And there hasn't emerged to date that third candidate that you were sort of hoping for in Chris Van Hollen or whomever, who could come in and perhaps create more, split up the vote in the Democratic field in a way that you might have hoped. Perhaps the wild card here is Josh Rales, who has a lot of money to spend and hasn't had a presence yet. You have essentially three white Jewish candidates who are in the field: Cardin, Lichtman, and Rales, and yourself. How do you see getting from what is anywhere from 6 to 10 points behind to winning in the primary?
Well,
and we only have 30 seconds.
Well, polls are still poppycock, right? The only poll that counts are the ones that people conduct on Election Day, and they will do that. Thank God, all over the state, they will do that on Election Day. But, you know, it is what it is. I've run in so many races, I worry less about who's in the race and more about what am I trying to do and what am I trying to bring and how am I trying to define myself and what I want people to know. So for a year and 4 months, this is all I do. I get up, I go around the state every day, I live off my earnings, my savings. I go out and talk to people about real ideas and bringing truth to power and having a government that works and breaking through the political noise. And the fact that there are other candidates out there is a credit to the process. God help us if we ever get into elections where you only have one person to choose from. So it's good for the voters. It's good for the process. It's good for me. But having won by 3 votes a long, long time ago, I recognize that every vote is important, and I think we'll do fine. We're working hard. You know, I need your vote. Did I talk to you about that yet?
Many thanks to former Congressman Kweisi Mfume for joining us and sharing his views. We invited Ben Cardin to join us for this telecast, but he failed to respond. The primary is September 12th. I'm Mark Cohen, and this has been Coffee House Forum. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Begins with me walking fast, a winding path through deep woods, wondering what's next. Music, first muffled in the dark, draws close. Keyboards, guitar, bass, drums, electric, a sound that's spiraled down decades, almost a DNA. Miles. The band, all faceted thrash and fury, cymbals flared to guitar riffs rising, calms into a groove that grows to find its way home, which is to say the blues. Enter the horn. Wake up, Buddy Bolton. Wake up, Muddy Waters. Satchmo. He blew a cathedral that night, unseen in the pine forest dark. Then, soul done, he's there. We stare at each other. The band burns on, invisible, back among the trees. No words, just a glance. Me and Miles, in a sudden cocoon of silence in the woods. I look him in the eyes 2 long seconds, till the band picks up a new sound, high and sweet, tentative. a bird learning to fly. I'm on soprano sax. Miles gives a few short notes to point a path, and there I go, not quite Wayne Shorter. They should teach his Spanish key solo in calligraphy schools. But still, I'm playing. Miles scowls as if to say, "You're no Wayne Shorter." But he smiles just a bit as I ease into the solo. Then he heads on out.
The NSA story is a conundrum because it really is compacted upon itself. We really don't know very much. From early 2002 on, there were stories and rumors that were circulating. Because a book was coming out by one of the New York Times reporters, they finally decided to put it in the New York Times last December. But unfortunately, the part of the story they put in was a kind of red herring. It was a simplification of what was going on, saying that NSA was now doing domestic surveillance. Most people took that to mean domestic wiretapping, that people were listening into conversations. And I don't think that's really what this scandal's about. There is some of that. What really appears to be happening in the NSA case is that a series of institutions that grew up in the Defense Department that were used for everything from measuring certain types of signals, intelligence, just indications of activity, kind of just electronic measurements of things, all the way across to what's called data mining, were combined together using mass databases so that there was an early warning system. So the misnomer, I think, was that this is wiretapping. It's not wiretapping. It's a whole new phenomenon. This early warning thing is not all people would think it was bad, and might in fact be quite appropriate to the threat, but we don't know that the rule book's not there. Who monitors it? We know now that Congress doesn't know much about it. They know that they don't know something, but they're not quite sure what it is they don't know. And so you have a situation in which we're flying blind. And in that situation, is there information that's being retained for years and years on people? Is it being accumulated? Are people who are presumed to be more likely, for example, are there a disproportionate number of people with Islamic backgrounds that are there whose just a sheer pattern of calling relatives abroad begins to bring them into it for a period of extra scrutiny? Do these things make sense? Is there a proportionality? Is there judgment implied? So this is one of these areas where until we find out, until there's some sort of a real aggressive congressional oversight, until there appears to be a second branch of government on the horizon, we're not going to know, and there's no way to write legislation that will prevent what it is you don't know is happening.
Together, I come back alone.
no more. You won't feel his hand again. Go and light the candles and draw the latch string in, 'cause there ain't no one knocking at the door. Ain't nobody knocking. Ain't nobody knocking. That ain't no one knocking at the door.
I'd knock at the door, but that could be dangerous. Well, that sounds like a really, first off, Zoe, welcome to the coffee house.
Thanks for having me,
I
David.
was enthused for a moment. I forgot where I was, and I thought we were just sitting in the living room talking. That sounds like a very old tune. It has that sort of, from a mountain ballad, like it would be way back in the hills of North Carolina. And yet,
I wrote it summer before last.
yeah, but it's true to the tradition.
I love doing that.
It works.
I try to do that a lot.
Yeah.
And I was actually, I wrote it because I was teaching a workshop called Learning from the Masters. We were taking apart songs and figuring out why are these good songs and what can we steal.
Right.
And I had analyzed the song by Gillian Welch called One Morning, which is one of my favorite songs. It's like an entire Faulkner short story in 12 lines. And I said, okay, can I do that?
Yeah.
So that's where the song came from.
It's it has that sort of, I expected you to say, oh, well, it was influenced by Tommy Jarrell, or, you know, one of those great guys that recently, you know, recently in the last 10 or 15 years passed away after being icons among the genre. And that's sort of the essence of the folk singer, right, is to capture and yet keep it modern, essentially.
Sometimes the writing process is like remembering something that I already know.
Yeah.
And when it's like that, I know that I'm onto something.
I got a good segue. You said the writing process. We could talk about your association with the Songwriters Association of Washington.
I've been involved with them since I've been in the Washington area. And
About 4 years.
About 4 years.
Yeah.
And they're a great group of people.
You're on the board.
I was on the board. I ran an open mic for them. Open mic is still going.
Where is that open
That's
mic?
at the New Deal Cafe in Greenbelt, the fourth
Perfect.
Thursday of the month.
And it doesn't matter what month, it's the fourth Thursday. And
Yeah, we
whenever
get into
people are
trouble
viewing
around Thanksgiving and
yeah,
Christmas.
they'll figure
but
it out.
Yeah.
How about a song to take us out? What are you gonna switch the guitar?
Yeah.
Let me have that banjo here.
Thank you.
Hey, we got the color code thing right. I'm just realizing we're both sort of maroon and black in reverse order. What's this one called? Not
This-
the guitar, but the song.
Yes. This one is called Elegy. And my aunts gave me this song, basically. One of my aunts wrote a letter saying, always use the good dishes.
Aha.
And I talked to my other aunt to see whether there was a family story that went with this, and there wasn't, but she told me some things that turned into this
And
song.
now there is.
And now there is.
All right, take it away.
This crystal glass was given to my grandma on her wedding day. It was one of 12 that were only used for guests, and it loves candlelight. It loves the morning sun. Spent its days in darkness in a big oak chest, waiting for white linen and the silver and the wine. On a table set for angels it would shine. And she said, glasses may break if you use them every day. You must keep them safe
They're like hearts that wait. Mostly you can get along with less. Wait for special times to use the best. This crystal glass was given to my mother as a legacy. It was one of 10 from my grandmother's estate. And it loves candlelight, it loves the morning sun, but it spent years marked fragile in a packing crate, till my mother rediscovered it in 1989. She held it to the light to see it shine, and she said, glasses may break if you use them every day. You can keep them safe, but what good are they if they just stay shut up in some chest? Why wait to use the very best? So here's a toast to lovely things. Hear the crystals speak as it clicks against my rings, and see the facets shine. Makes water taste like wine. Clink the glasses and they sing. This crystal glass was broken on a clumsy Monday morning. It was one of 4 that my mother gave to me. And it loved candlelight, it loved the morning sun, and I'm sad to see it go, but I still have 3. So I will pour some orange juice and drink to precious things. Shake the broken pieces and they sing, and they say glasses may break if you use them every day. That's the risk you take. They're like hearts that wait, and every day we'll put them to the test. But every day deserves the very best.
He couldn't afford a coat again this year, wore every sweatshirt he owned. Passing windows, Alice took him from 7th. Away the yuppie faces swarming Chinatown with their looks. Winter sweet when you got some soup and no Cold Stone Blues brewing in your beer, and Alice waiting in the warmth of a 13th floor. When Papo looks on her 45-degree angle eyes, the silent moon rises from her mouth, and to the velvet evening that engulfs him, makes him want to speak, makes him want to stand up.
Welcome to In Step at the Coffee House. Every year, over 60 cities around the world host what are called fringe festivals. And in the summer of 2006, the District of Columbia will join the party with the first ever Capital Fringe Festival. What is it? Well, the festival will feature hundreds of live performances by adventurous and innovative artists from the DC, Baltimore region, from elsewhere in the States, and even artists from overseas. Multiple performances will take place each day in more than 20 traditional and non-traditional performance venues around downtown DC's Penn Quarter neighborhood. Emphasizing the edgy and the offbeat, the Fringe cultivates experimental work of exceptional merit while remaining open to all. We're really pleased to be joined by Damian Sinclair, founder and executive director of the Capital Fringe Festival. Damian, welcome to the coffee house.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good. Here we are with our coffee. This is so good. What creates the creator of a fringe festival? Why do this?
Well, it started, I worked in Philadelphia about 5 or 6 years ago. Worked for a company called Pig Iron Theater Company, which was an experimental theater company. And we toured and produced shows at the Edinburgh Fringe, which is the founding Fringe Festival, more than 60 years old, and at the Philadelphia Fringe Festival. We've moved down here because my wife got a wonderful job, and when I was here, I missed what we experienced up in Philadelphia at the Philly Fringe, and so we decided to start our own Fringe Festival here.
That's great. And do you think DC is prime for this right now?
The moment's perfect.
Right. Why is that?
Well, I think the town is starting to develop in such a way that it's ready to embrace a festival of this type. I mean, it's a festival where a lot goes on. There's many performances, and the town, which is an extremely highly educated town, you can just tell they're just craving this. The artists are ready. I mean, we had over 110 applications for the festival in our first year.
That's great.
And so you can tell that on both sides, both on the audience side and on the artist side, that people are ready for this.
Right. And so over 100 applicants, you just said.
That is correct.
And now, what will we see? How many of those will we see in the Fringe Festival?
Well, we were able to get in about 100.
Right.
So we have about 100 arts groups doing over 400 performances in 10 days.
Wow. And this is all in the Penn Quarter district, and this in theaters, but it says non-traditional. What does non-traditional mean?
Well, it's a performing arts festival, which is theater, music, dance, puppetry, performance art, spoken word, and it takes place in venues from main stage of Woolly Mammoth, so a very traditional theater space, to the basement of a synagogue, to an art gallery. What we do is we transform these spaces that aren't traditionally performance spaces and make them performance ready.
Oh, that's wonderful. And some site-specific performances or not? Or
there is, we have some site-specific work this year. We have an installation at the National Building Museum.
Oh, wonderful.
There's a dancer named Ed Tyler who's going to be doing a 12-hour installation in there. And it's on the streets, it's in venues, it's all around. We actually have, for a fun thing, we have these soapboxes that we're putting out in front of each venue for spontaneous performance.
Oh, wonderful.
That'll be happening.
So anybody can come down and just get on a soapbox, right?
Get on their soapbox, and perform. Yeah, that's the point.
I think we can all know a few people we could send right onto that soapbox.
Exactly.
And so now I think of our town, and you say that DC's ready for this. We're a political town, and some of us are undefined, some are Republican, some are Democratic. Will all of us find this kind of nonpartisan involvement in the festival?
No, I definitely think you will. I mean, the programming runs the full gamut of mainstream work to very experimental work, and I think everybody's going to be able to find something that hits home with them.
That's great. So let's say that it's one of these 10 nights of the festival, and I decide that I'm going to go down with a bunch of my friends and partake of something at this festival. How do I prepare myself to be fringed?
Well, the first thing you want to do is go to our website, which is www.capfringe.org. And we actually wrote out 5 rules on how to fringe.
Oh, wonderful.
But the most important thing, there are 2 really important things to know, is that you're not going to see it all.
Right.
So if you go in with that mindset, and also just to let your hair down and experiment and try some things that you wouldn't otherwise see. The ticket price for every show is $15, so it's very accessible. It's easy to get in and out of shows, and you can see as many as 3 to 4 performances a night.
Wow, that's great. And it seems to me that letting your hair down is also is an equivalent to a state of curiosity, or I always think that kids are really good at watching live performance because they have less preconceived notions. How do you feel? What made you curious about some of the people that you're looking at as you thumb through this all these applicants?
Well, I think one of the fun things about the festival is that the range is so broad. So we have things that we're doing things from an evening with George Burns all the way to a 24-hour.
Isn't George Burns dead? No.
It's a gentleman who plays George Burns, but yes, he has passed away. It's running to a 24-hour straight improv dance and music piece.
Oh, what will that be? That's interesting.
It's 2 performers, Daniel Burkholder and Jonathan Mattis, and they're going to be performing for 24 hours straight.
Wonderful.
And you'll be able to get a pass to see any time during the first 23 hours, you can come see the last hour.
Wow.
And I think part of their concept is the constant performing. It's the stripping away of boundaries.
Sure. So in a way, it seems to me that a fringe festival unlike another presenter, can commission artists to do things that they might not otherwise think of, or take them to a new place like this, it sounds?
Most definitely. I mean, I think what we do is we're actually more of an outlet. You know, we're not a traditional presenter in the sense that we commission people to do work. We provide an outlet that makes it easy for people to do what they want to do. And so what you find in our festivals, the artists are doing things that, you know, they may not have had an opportunity to do otherwise. So we have that unique ability to let people be creative.
Sure. And I know that in situations like this, it's not like going to the Warner Theater or to the you know, the opera house at the Kennedy Center, where there's millions of dollars of sets and costumes along with this. How do you think that affects the art, for better or worse? Or
well, I mean, I think it makes it more real, and I think it makes it more accessible for you. I mean, when you start stripping away the costumes, the sets, the big set pieces, you tend to get more of an audience and artist interaction that you might not get, you know, at more traditional venues.
Sure. That's great. I'm still fascinated by how, you know, I see you and you have a nice suit on, much nicer than mine. Costs a lot more, I'm sure. And you seem like this bright scrub, kind of business degree kind of guy. What is your background?
I'm actually a marketing major.
Oh, you are? See,
yeah,
good.
I sure am. I've never been an artist. I actually am very much in love with artists.
Yeah.
I love dancers. I love theater artists. And so, you know, my role is simply as a facilitator. My job is to go out and raise the money, get the people to come.
Right.
But in the end, this event's about the artists, and it's not about my artistic vision or anyone's artistic vision. It's about artists and what they want to do.
Right. And will you? I know money isn't always an issue when we're dealing with the arts. It's, you know, people who's they've got to put food on the table and all that. And I know that dancers will. Or performers will get paid in some way and all that. But as far as like support, have you felt supported by the businesses in Penn Quarter or the city in some ways?
We've been very lucky. I mean, everybody's been very supportive. The DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities is funded. You know, the Downtown Business Improvement District has helped out in this. I mean, the timing for this has really felt right. And what's nice about it too is we sell the tickets. But more than a majority of the ticket income goes right back to the artists.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we just create the outlet.
That's really great. And have you? I know you've been dealing with artists. I met you some months ago when you were first hatching this idea on different people around town, and you were as exuberant then as you are now, which is really great to see. I know there are probably, you know, things that are causing you to wake up in the middle of the night, but you know, what's the most pleasurable thing about this whole experience so far for you?
The funnest thing has been to see what people are bringing to the table. I mean, some of these shows are just an absolute blast, and you don't know what they're going to be like. You don't know, you know, the kind of work that you've never met the artist before, and these are people you've never heard from before. And I think it's just wonderful to start to see that come together.
Yeah. It's you know, I've lived here 12 or 13 years. How long have you been in the DC area?
Just been here for 3 years. So.
And you've probably done more in collecting this group of people than any of the artists who are off busy doing their work. You know, I think we pride ourselves on that end of it. But we owe you a big round of thanks, I think, and just bringing these like minds, but different aesthetics and like minds together. It seems to me that it's going to be a real hoot to go down to the quarter and just see what's up in these 10 days.
It'll be a hoot.
So and a typical day starts when in the
on a weekday we start about 5 o'clock. We run performances usually till about 11 o'clock, and then on weekends we run from noon to midnight.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds fascinating, and if I've never seen a Fringe festival, which I haven't, after all this time, you'd think that, you know, I would have fallen into one by now. As an artist, I'm looking forward to seeing what combusts in all this. Now, what happens after the festival? Do you hibernate for a year, or what happens?
Honestly, my brother lives in South Carolina, so my actual goal is to play golf for about 2 weeks straight.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, we'll hope to see then, you know, that there will probably be, I hope there is, a second Fringe festival. What do you need to see happen in this first Fringe festival to guarantee a second festival?
Well, we need to see, I mean, honestly, what we need to see is that it was a worthwhile outlet for the artists. And if it was worth it for them, we'll do it again the second year. But I tell a lot of people that, you know, if we're going to go down this first year, we're going to go down shooting. So this is going to be a big event, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Go
and
down
so,
big.
if we're going to lose, we're going to lose big. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
I think of the metaphor actually of Daniel Burkholder and John performing for 24 hours straight. It's probably going to feel like 10 days of 24 hours straight for you during that time.
Yeah, it probably will.
But I wish you the best of luck with it, and I can't wait to be a part of it and to see it all.
Well,
so
thank you.
That's good. So thank you so much, Capitol Fringe Festival's Damian Sinclair, for helping to bring this festival to DC and for joining us here at the Coffee House. I'm Peter DeMuro, and this has been In Step.